People who have been to more than 10 countries. What are the worst things about international travel? Story 1. Long haul has a new meaning living in New Zealand. With domestic flights it takes a 40-hour transit to get to Europe. There's a non-stop Emirates flight from Auckland to Dubai that takes 17 hours, then at least 4 hours layover, and it's still another 8-hour flight to Paris, Milan, London, etc. It's not fun. Story 2. I generally love international travel. Going through immigration pretty much always sucks. Whether it's long lines or rude staff, Hong Kong is probably the best. Just scan the passport and move on. Story 3. It is the constant battle between wanting to be friendly, getting to know locals, and not getting scammed. I don't want to be curt or dismissive or seem rude, but there are some countries where a small percentage of the population are just out to fleece you. Story 4. The worst part is the commute, not even the travel itself. I like airplanes and even thought they're cramped and sometimes full of weird people. It's still fine, but the commute, ugh. Your flight is at 1,200, so you have to get there by the latest 0900, assuming it's a busy airport with an international flight. But it's also an hour's drive to the airport, and you gotta make sure traffic doesn't hinder you. So you leave home at 7, which means having to wake up by the absolute latest at 6, so that you have time to still shower, pack your toiletries, pack your chargers, get everything sorted, and give the Uber time to get to you. So by the time you get into your seat on your flight, you've already been up and about and stressing for the last 6 hours. That's a full day's work, and only then does your traveling actually only start. Story 5. Schedule and getting hungry at weird times, constant jet lag, airport security lines, and the stress of losing documents or luggage. The adventure's great, but the logistics can be exhausting. Story 6. The constant packing and unpacking, long security lines, visa issues, and getting sick abroad. The fun parts are amazing, but the in-between can be exhausting. Story 7. Food availability. If in your house you have food, you know what's nearby, their hours, etc. When you're staying at a hotel or hostel, you can't just whip up a sandwich because you don't have anything. You might not even have a fridge. Thirsty. Maybe the place you're staying at sells drinks, maybe not. Is there a gas station, corner store, or grocery store you can walk to? What are their hours? Oh, you've been at museums and such for the last 10 hours. It's 8 p.m. and you're hungry but all the local restaurants in this part of town close at 8 p.m. You don't have a car, so you have to walk bus train back to the hostel hotel, and then attempt to Google if there are any options further out, and then figure out how to get there. There's just no quick fast food option. That's exactly how it was for me in both Mexico City and also Bogota, I've learned. Day 1 I try to find a grocery store and buy at least a box of cereal, so something is at my hostel. Story 8. I've been to 60 countries, and the worst thing for me is the travel part. Coming from Australia, we're so far from everything, it takes so long to get to places, and the flights aren't cheap either. Other than that, everything is manageable. I've never really been sick while traveling, and my bags have only been lost once. Story 9. Having a mental health episode, or in general being sick otherwise. You want to be having a new adventure, you want to be meeting people, seeing things, having a good time, but for some reason you're feeling paranoid and depressed and alone and exhausted, and while you know you're doing something you want and love, you also just can't wait for it to be over, or worse, regret going in the first place. It can make you feel very vulnerable and weak and out of place, like you don't belong. When you first start traveling, the thrill can hold all this stuff at bay. Then when you get used to it, you catch up with yourself and your depression feels at home wherever you are. Story 10. If you're traveling with a passport from a third world country, the nightmare begins before you start your travels, and when you initiate your visa process, the process will be long and tedious, and requires lots of paperwork and patience. It's like a passive-aggressive way of saying you aren't really welcome, and if you want to come, we will try to make it very difficult. Story 11. Immigration. Nothing is more soul-destroying than waiting in a line full of people who don't want to be in said line, waiting to see someone who doesn't want to see you, managed by someone who doesn't want to manage you. I've traveled a fair amount over the years, and it doesn't matter if it's waiting in line in Dubai when 6 A380s have landed at the same time, or waiting for a ferry to France. It's all miserable. I remember covering 5 countries in 12 hours, and the passport check at Dover was the most annoying part. Although we did annoy some poor Belgian bloke when we'd been driving through France for a few hours and stopped for petrol. We asked a guy at the petrol station where in France we were, and he angrily gestured at the French sign and said, "Messieurs, you are in Belgium." Didn't do much for Anglo-continental relations. Story 12. Pregification. A lot of these cities and areas you think you want to travel to cater so strongly to tourists that the authentic and unique vibes have been sucked out of it. Barcelona, Prague, Venice, and Lisbon are a few examples. Story 13. Airports. Loved them at first, but God, they just so hard now. Talking to you, DFW, Atlanta, and Heathrow. Also, business class has been feeling a bit cheaper lately, regardless of the airline. Story 14. I was an international recruiter for 20 years, spending about 150 to 200 days on the road per year. I was mostly in SEA LATAM. I think the hardest thing for me was the long-distance flights, frequent time zone changes, poor diet, etc. I would do junkets like 12 cities, 5 countries in 20 days, airport, taxi, hotel, meetings, dinner, drinks. Repeat. It was fun but took a toll. Story 15. Always getting sick after catching something on a plane on trip from the United States to Asia. Masking up, vitamin C for weeks before, losing a bit of weight, nothing works. Story 16. Not having unlimited drinking water readily accessible. I drink a crazy amount of water on a daily basis, and I definitely took that for granted until my first time in Africa. Story 17, I solo travel, so meeting people, it can also be the best. It's crazy how much it varies and how it can affect your trip. You win some, you lose some. Story 18, I have traveled a lot. My passport is from a third world country, and this has been a very annoying thing. You need so many documents for visa interviews with so many annoying questions, even after proving beyond doubt that you're eligible to travel not just to first world countries, but also to other third world countries. Interviews are not free and generally non-refundable. The treatment in airports can be annoying as well and borderline discriminatory. Not all, but generally your passport determines how much skepticism the immigration officials have. I get it, we're poor. Story 19, getting sick in a language you don't speak. Missing your bed like it's a person you once loved. Meaningless in cities you'll never return to. Proving geography can't save you from yourself. Learning not all cultures are equal, including the one you left behind. Being poor while traveling. IMO, the worst crime you can commit. Global suffering, but make it scenic. Story 21, being tall in an economy seat for hours. Or even worse, being tall with other tall people in neighboring seats for hours. 2. Cancelled flights. 3. Crying kids on planes. Story 21, it's just tiring. Delays, turbulence, passport queues, waiting for luggage, airborne diseases on flights, long days, and those single-serving hotel coffee bags looking at you. US. Doesn't mean it's not worth it though. We should remember to separate the international travel part from the experience of a city, country, or culture. Story 22, I used to travel a lot for work, and while business and first-class travel is very comfortable, there is a reason you get it. Most of the time it was a red-eye flights and early start in a foreign office or site with long days. Most of the time you would not even step into a hotel for 16 to 18 hours after getting off a plane. Never had an issue with customs or local culture or food. One big exception being an Aussie is coffee around the world is terrible. Also sunscreen overseas is essential water compared to what we have in Australia. I only really felt unsafe in the USA because I knew people carried guns. Story 23. Not having enough legroom on flights, immigration, getting sick, figuring out cellular service, getting scammed, realizing after you're home that you missed something, travel withdrawals once you're home. Story 24, visa application process. You wouldn't understand it unless you are from a country with a weak passport, like mine. It is at best super inconvenient, expensive, and at times downright dehumanizing the way you get asked to prove your worth. Schengen visa, my. Chasing that expensive visa and then only Googling how to avoid pickpockets and scams in first world countries was surreal. Story 25, longest flights. Being in Australia tucked away in our little side of the world means it's a long flight to anywhere. Going to Iceland, Tanzania, and Quebec were the longest flights with stopovers I can remember. Took 2 days. Story 26, probably when the cheapest flight by a significant margin includes a 30-hour transit in China or something. That, or if you've got the Hank Hill and your tailbone starts to bruise up around hour 10. Or when the person next to you tries to small talk you and you have to make it clear quickly and in the most polite way possible that no. But the infinite free booze guaranteed by the Warsaw Convention or whatever definitely help with those last two. Story 27, visited a mere 25 odd countries, so I'm not really a globetrotter. Downsides, I remember currencies. At some point in time I had 6 different currencies in my wallet, but that was before credit and debit cards became usable in most countries. Nowadays, it's the absence of touchless payments, a universal app for payments using your phone Visa. The administration to get one, and the time it takes to get one, curfews, or rather the strong advise not to leave the hotel after dark, especially in America. Upsides, plenty, new cultures, new approaches to common problems, food. Story 28, one time I went to the Dominican Republic, and on our layover, there was this complete of a gate agent in the Toronto airport who absolutely refused to let us get on our plane. She said it was because our luggage would not be able to come with us. And who knows if that was true, there was someone who our gate agent told us to go to. He looked at the file on his computer, and said we could board. We told our gate agent about this newfound information. She said he was wrong. Whatever the case, her boss also told her to not under any circumstances let us on. At the time, we had a group of 10, and 2 members of our group were let on the plane. The kicker though, we were going to an 8-day all-inclusive resort. The person who paid for everyone to go there was in our portion of the group, and the next flight there was not for 3 days. The pilots actually turned off the plane to wait for us, I think, or at least that is what we were told. Eventually we were let on the plane. Then it was delayed a further 6 hours, and I think that did have something to do with us not being let on. Our checked bags also ended up coming with us, all because of that one gate agent. Story 29, Middle East, extreme wealth disparity, seeing people functionally in slavery, insane driving, and some incredible rudeness. The benefits were incredible politeness, interesting people, and wild diversity of both people and cultures. Spain, parking, urban design, and bureaucracy. Don't rent a car, don't use Airbnb, and order vermouth before lunch. Benefits are culture, climate, people, food and speed of life. France, people if you try and speak French badly. Benefits culture, food, and the vibes. UK, staggering costs, insane driving in goat tracks at 4x the speed that would be rational in the situation. Food. Benefits, amazingly beautiful. London is dense with cool things, very interesting people. Northern India, staggering levels of focus on money. Literally not a single conversation with anyone that wasn't about money at some level. It was gross. Benefits: amazingly cool sights, southern India, litter, driving. Benefits: amazing people, super fun, great food. Cambodia, history, benefits: history. Vietnam, finding a kid tooth in a spring roll. Benefits: I can't even begin. Thailand, it's hot. If you are and you are going to get rocked. They do not around. Benefits: if you are cool you are going to have a blast. The food: Australia, spiders, spiders and spiders. Jordan, buying gas. Benefits: Petra, Dead Sea, super nice people, Turkey scammers, machismo bullshit. Benefits: too many to list. Story 30, trying to pack enough to be comfortable, but leave room to bring stuff back. I went to Norway and didn't get anything, but my bag was too heavy to fly back. Story 31, getting food poisoning. Nothing dampers a trip worse than food poisoning. A cold is manageable with meds and just slowing down the itinerary, but food poisoning or a stomach bug, that puts you on your. Story 32, traveling to not so safe countries. Always gotta pay attention to your belonging. Stressful if you come from a country where you can walk around with a phone in your hand, and at night every country has its own scams going on, so you always should check beforehand. If there are no ride-sharing apps and you have to use taxis. If you go to multiple countries in one trip, trying to keep track of the currency conversion, flight can also be part of it depending on the people, children aboard, and sometimes you just get a sucky outdated plane. Story 33, the taxi drivers. Wherever you go they're always hustling, from taking down the signs to the bus station so you can't find it, to taking a deliberately long route, to their meter always mysteriously not working. Everywhere you go you have to be on high alert. It gets worse though. I've had a lift lined up and had them threaten the person who was going to drive me into not doing so. I've also had their mates pretend to be police and close a road to stop me from getting to my hotel as part of a larger scam. I always avoid taxis wherever possible. Story 34, how complicated tourist visas are becoming. Visas on arrival are becoming a thing of past, replaced with e-visas to be completed 24 hours before flying. If you make a mistake, most of the time you can't change it, and they check-in staff will give you. Story 35, having to come back to the States. I love, with every fiber of my being internationally located. I get sad every time I have to fly back, having to leave what brings my soul so much peace and happiness. Story 36, trying to figure out the best course of action while driving through no man's land in Malawi with a 106F fever. Despite having religiously followed every rule to avoid the usual tropical diseases is a uniquely scary experience. Dealing with health emergencies and accidents are usually the worst. Story 37, getting a food poisoning. I've been through several. Once ended up in a hospital in rural China. Staying overnight in a small airport where nothing's open. This was in Turkey. Won't be doing that again. Story 38, food poisoning has been the worst for me. It was a long and painful evening and night, sweating, shaking from cold, vomiting everything, fever, all the jazz. Probably should have gone to hospital. Story 39, I have a warped spine and some seats instantly give me pain. 2 hours is bearable at best. Brain melting at worst. Long-haul flights of 6 hours or more make me want to open a door mid-flight. Story 40, as an American, Americans, followed by Chinese tourists. The entitlement on Americans is truly astounding. You're the one traveling. It is your responsibility to adapt, not the world's responsibility to pander to you. And from my experience, I have noticed Chinese tourists are very. They only care about their group and they behave like their group is ultra VIP all the time. They don't care about how their actions impact others. Their group's experience is the priority at the expense of everyone and everything around them. Story 41, waiting in airports. It was a long time ago, but we had a connection in Turkey and most of the airport was not air-conditioned. It was a nightmare. Also a long time ago, when I used to choose the lowest ticket we waited for 18 hours at Kiev Airport. We lost our minds. Story 42, visas. If you're not from America or some other first world country, you have to apply, wait in lines and pay huge fees, and that's before you even leave your own country. Story 43, I was always really lucky while traveling. The worst thing, most intimidating for me, was trying to seek healthcare for my husband and our kids separate occasions, when I don't speak their language fluently enough to explain properly what is wrong. Story 44, United Airlines and many of their Star Alliance partners and their seats that are designed for the average height of a man in 1837. Even scooted all the way back in my seat, and even with the person in front not leaning back, my knees are digging into the seat in front of me. Story 45, the other tourists. Especially if you're American, you'll just be minding your business enjoying the view, and some Eurotwat will start lecturing you about things you have no control over, in the most condescending tone possible, or a British will invite you out drinking, then start a massive bar fight which might land you in jail. Or a tourist pedo will reveal that's why they're there, or you'll hear a 45-minute sad story followed by a request for money, etc. Avoid other tourists. Talk to locals when it's appropriate. If you're in an economically disadvantaged area, look like you've been traveling for months, be dirty. Don't stare up at buildings. Wear scuffed shoes. If you bought a new backpack for travel, stain the out of it before you leave. If a random local approaches you while walking, say late for a bus or some other thing, and keep walking. Otherwise you'll be harassed and targeted for scams. Do not listen to other tourists when they talk about local laws. The world is full of crazy idiots. In regions where water treatment is unreliable, do not drink from water bottles which were opened by another person, especially out of sight. You should verify that the cap wasn't glued on, or just screwed back on. Verify that wherever you're eating has a bathroom with a sink. More developed nations have laws requiring hand washing. Many nations do not, and dysentery is no joke. You'll wish you were dead for like a week at it if you're going somewhere tropical and poor. Get a tan before you leave. Again, the point is to look like you've been exposed to all the scams already. Story 46. Less so now with things like the euro, but ending up with a drawer full of random currencies. In small amounts it's a nice souvenir, but it'll over budget and finish with more than I planned and not want to blow it on useless stuff at the airport coming home. I always think it's okay, I'll use it when I go back to that country, but I never do. Story 47. 60 countries. Getting sick, jet lag, ultra-long haul flights, coming home, scary drives looking at you, India, taxi scams looking at you, India, pollution again, India, plus China. Story 48. 1. Not flying in business first class on long-haul flights. Once you try it, it becomes very difficult to fly in economy class without a lay-flat bed. 2. Jet lag. 3. Scammers in third-world countries trying to rob you while not knowing how to respond as you don't speak the language and don't want to get into trouble in a foreign country. Story 49. Getting from the airport to wherever I'm meant to be going in the new country is never that fun. It's such a ripe time to be ripped off. You have no idea how long it's meant to take or what is a fair price or whether you can haggle. You've got too much stuff to do anything except accept your fate. Story 50. How ridiculously expensive you guys pay for internet. At home, I get unlimited data capped at 6 megabits per second for a whole month. 6 gigabytes hotspot for only room 30, roughly what, $7 or $8. Story 51. 1. Getting sick, 2 beggars. I did a 6-week backpacking trip around UK Europe. I'm obviously an American on holiday, so I got the bite roughly 100 times per day. If I gave everyone who asked 10 cents, that's 400 I'd have to budget in. And as an FYI, I never met anybody backpacking around that had an extra 400 in the budget. Story 52. Waiting on the airport when you're going back. Not only you're finished your vacations, but you're sitting there even longer than on the flight to the destination because you're in a new place, so you have to aim to be at the airport even sooner to account for all potential delays you may not be aware of. Story 53. There honestly is no downside. Maybe, if I had to find fault for the sake of it, I'd places like the Balkans where there are a million tiny countries and you're crossing borders every other day. Changing currency over and over again can be maddening, but even that's going away now with tapping bank card. Story 54. Cell phones that only work in certain countries. Airplanes are too cold mostly. I often request a blanket. The differing rules for entering some countries, like requiring an exit ticket even though I don't necessarily know how long I will be staying, transfers, some airports make this much harder than it should be. Security measures then have basically told terrorists that they have won by causing disruption and inconvenience for millions of travelers. Story 55. I live in South Africa, so every place is long haul, not as bad as NZ. I worked in the mining industry and traveled to 57 countries on business during my career. Many of these were unusual places. The worst were the long layovers. One last-minute trip to eastern Kazakhstan went Johannesburg, Addis Ababa, Rome, London, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Kiev, Almaty, Usman. Without a long enough break to get a room and sleep properly. It took 78 hours. For context, it took Apollo 11 75 hours to reach the moon. Story 56. I lived abroad for a year. I actually love flying, but there's no way I'll go back to visit if I can't afford to fly business class. 14-hour flights in economy class are brutal. Story 57. I usually fly out from the States, and the biggest pain can be just the time commitment. Getting to Asia or parts of Europe can take 20 hours, and that's if you're lucky enough to be flying into a major city. If not, tack on a few more layovers and questionable airport meals, and let's not forget how U.S. airlines manage to charge you for everything short of oxygen. Then there's the fun roulette of what your stomach will or won't tolerate. You can try to be super careful, bottled water, no raw stuff, avoiding sketchy spots, but sometimes you still end up with a surprise case of Bali belly or Delhi belly. And when that happens, good luck navigating local pharmacies or figuring out if you need to go to a hospital just to get Imodium. But probably the most exhausting part for me is striking balance between being open and friendly because honestly, travel is amazing, while keeping your guard up. Almost every country has a few people whose full-time job seems to be scamming tourists. Some are harmless, some are creative, but either way you can't fully switch off, which gets old fast. That being said, it's still worth it, and the world has really beautiful places and amazing sights to see. Story 58. Being uncomfortable in planes and buses, as well as the hot muggy weather in some countries. In India, the filth and poor hygiene is also a challenge. Story 59. The travel there. I can't sleep on the plane and all other countries are so far away, so it takes over 24 hours to get somewhere when you factor in layovers, needing to be at the airport early, etc. It's awful and putting me off traveling more. Story 60. Jet lag absolutely wrecks me. Doesn't matter how much I prepare, I feel like absolute for the first 48 hours of a trip. Food poisoning in Bangkok was pretty nightmarish. Luckily the only time I've gotten sick like that while traveling. Story 61. Train stations are gross. People just openly everywhere and you halfway can't blame them because public restrooms aren't common. I'd recommend wearing gloves when using public transportation. Story 62. Luggage handling. People in poorer countries will steal your if they know they can get away with it. It's not the worst thing in the world, but still, happened to me both in Africa and former Soviet lands. I'm not going to specify the countries since they were both amazing outside of that, but like dog I would prefer you didn't nab my camping tools. Story 63. I believe economy and currencies might be obvious, but I hate it when I have to say no to something because it wasn't on my initial plans, and how high dollar is, as you can tell. I'm not North American. Story 64. The flight. I love flying, but after a while I definitely get really uncomfortable in those dog seats. Can't sleep on the plane either because they're so uncomfortable, so inevitably I sleep away a lot of the first days of my trips. Story 65. 1. Customs borders passports. 2. Different electrical outlets voltage. Mobile phone roaming. 3. Traveling while you have a raging case of Montezuma's Revenge explosive diarrhea. 4. Having to get tons of vaccines or take prophylactics that regular people don't, and I don't mean flu COVID, I mean yellow fever Brazil, malaria, Africa scent. America, typhoid C Asia, Hep B East Europe. Still have my yellow WHO card from 25 years ago in the same folio as my passport. Story 66. I've lived in 5 different countries, and going to government offices trying to deal with bureaucratic stuff in a language you don't understand is brutal without a translator. It's sincerely my personal conception of. Story 67. I've been to 22. Sometimes not being able to charge your phone easily to communicate with people, take pictures, etc., is awful. I had this problem in Munich once, for example. Few places there have outlets you can use. Story 68. Going through customs and having to unpack your bag looking for fruits, seeds, meat, grass, etc. It's low-key so embarrassing to close it up again in front of border force agents because they can see I've overpacked and am disorganized. Story 69. Mass tourism and globalization. I know many people love big holiday resorts, but this is my idea of traveling halfway across the globe to a country you want to explore or try to understand the culture, being stuck at a hotel in Mexico or Turkey and not seeing more than the road on the journey from the airport. Endless buffets where the quantity is more important than quality, eating sushi and chips every day and not trying the local cuisine. Story 70. Depends on the country, but the water in some of the less developed countries can wreck your gut. No fun spending most of your travel time with explosive diarrhea. Story 71. Just all the waiting around. A 3-hour flight requires getting to the airport at least 2 hours before. Then flights can be delayed, waiting to get on the plane, once on the other side waiting to get off the plane, waiting for passport control, waiting for baggage, waiting for transport to the place you're staying, etc. Makes even a short flight into most of a day. Still worth it though. Story 72. Honestly, the lines to re-enter the US after landing, so much longer than in other countries, plus the rudeness and power tripping of some of the personnel. At least once out of every 3 or 4 entries I get someone who is offended that I would choose to live outside of the US. Thankfully, that is getting better as more entries have automatic points for citizens. Story 73. Food poisoning. I got horrible food poisoning norovirus right before a 7-hour night bus in Vietnam. The bus stopped once after 1 hour, and I was too sick to get out of the bus. I have never had to puke and so badly before in my life. Everything hurt. As soon as the bus arrived, I ran out to the bathroom and did all 3 at the same time. I spent the next week just lying in bed all day with a fever, puking, having diarrhea, and I missed out on Delat. At least the temperature there was nice. You'll get food poisoning if you travel. It's just unavoidable, especially if you travel outside of the EU. Story 74. Flying in economy. It's disgusting that amount of personal space for such a long trip somehow became the norm. Throw in a baby anywhere near you and you descend to another level of. Story 75. Not being comfortable. Unless you book a luxury hotel or first class or have hired a car, everything is just uncomfortable compared to what I'm used to in the USA. Smaller, more uncomfortable beds, uncomfortable chairs, weird showers and those without curtains, weird toilets that will 100 leave your stains behind. Small towels, small plates, smaller cars, lack of aircon, smaller everything. Less developed countries. Sometimes at night the sound of stray dogs or domesticated animals is super loud. Weird things like people cutting in line, driving insane, smoking everywhere. I know I sound miserable, but I really enjoy it. I enjoy seeing new things, meeting new people, enjoying different food. But for relaxing vacations, I'll prefer a nice all-inclusive resort on the beach where I can just do nothing. Story 76. Food poisoning while traveling. Spent 2 days hugging the porcelain in Kyoto, dealing with screaming babies on long international flights, getting your luggage stolen. Story 77. Americans thinking that no matter where they go everybody should speak American, they dress American. They have no respect for that culture or don't even learn how to say hello in that language. It's embarrassing how ignorant American tourists are. Most pre-smartphones were when it was really difficult to find a signal, getting lost, translations and maps. Smartphones have made international travel so much easier. Story 78. In no particular order. 1. The airport experience. 2. Flying. 3. Trying to find and book a good deal flight that works with your itinerary needs and doesn't have a 17-hour long layover. 4. Obviously any medical issue, but stomach bugs big time. 5. Local scams and flams. Every place has its own. Gotta learn them and keep an eye out. 6. Losing your wallet, passport, or both. 7. The TSA in particular. 8. Crossing some borders via land. Thailand, Cambodia was a bit crazy for instance. 9. Getting wet when you're wearing cotton and don't have backup clothes handy. 10. Climate you aren't used to, like a Canadian in Chi Minh City in the summer. Other than getting foodborne illness. Jet lag if the time difference is more than 3 or 4 hours. Story 79. Tour groups. They the life of everything. Everywhere you go, you only get to stay half as long as you wanted. Everywhere you eat is overpriced and touristy. I get that not everyone has it in them to plan a whole trip by themselves, but I feel that tours kinda defeat the purpose. I've definitely left at least one country thinking the tour ruined my impression of it. Story 80. Right after you just did your 14-hour flight and land, and have to get off the plane, through customs, you're sweaty, sticky, tired, jet-lagged, and you have to wait in line, get through customs, and then wait for your luggage, get to your hotel or where you're staying. That entire section of time sucks. Story 81. You have to expect the unexpected, which is the case for life in general, but it's harder when you are in an unfamiliar place and don't know the language or the healthcare system. I chipped a third of my front tooth, think Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber, when I was in Japan, and I was really worried about the process of going to a Japanese dentist. Luckily my tooth wasn't damaged to that degree, but I looked ridiculous for the rest of the trip.